It's time for Supply Chain Now Radio, broadcasting live from the supply chain capital of the country, Atlanta, Georgia. Supply Chain Now Radio spotlights the best in all things supply chain. The people, the technologies, the best practices, and the critical issues of the day. And now, here are your hosts.
Hey, good afternoon. Scott Luton here with you live on Supply Chain Now Radio. Welcome back to the show. So we're broadcasting live today, not from Atlanta, but from the South Carolina Fall Logistics Tech Talk in beautiful Charleston, South Carolina at the Gilliard Center. Our broadcast continues our partnership with the South Carolina Council on Competitiveness. And really, Greg, as we've seen throughout the interviews we've done already, this event really has been highlighting some of the innovative companies and the leaders that are driving the logistics industry forward in this booming state of South Carolina, right?
Yeah, it has. It's a really interesting mix of big established companies and startups in early stages. And it's particularly exciting for me to be at Tech Talk, because at Tech Talk, guess what we get to do? We get to talk tech. So,
well, look at me, the quarterback fumbling the ball.
It's okay. I think that was a good handoff.
So, as you've heard already to our audience, co-host joining me here today is Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur, trusted advisor, and board member. And one of the quick note to our audience, like all of our series on Supply Chain Now Radio, you can find our replays on a variety of channels: Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts from. As always, we'd love to have you subscribe so you don't miss anything. So, Greg, we have got kind of like the mayor is joining us here today, based on some of the feedback we've had from the convention here.
Yeah, right? we had to put up a police line around this place.
To our audience, that we have red barrier tape around the mobile studio here today. So, with no further ado, AJ Rakicki, founder and CEO at Centio. AJ, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Doing great. Glad to have you here. I know you are on a red eye from the West Coast here this morning, and you also presented.
Maybe a little
bit. In a little bit.
Okay,
yeah.
Coming up.
Yeah, coming up. So I'm excited, and thanks so much for having me.
We get a sneak peek. Fantastic. I look forward to it.
Yeah.
We'll critique him before he goes on stage. Make sure you're ready.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
So if our audience...
It's a free service.
Yeah, that's right. If our audience can't tell, we've had a good time on the warm-up conversation. Yeah. And right as we were going live, we got a little kind of behind-the-scenes story from AJ about kind of how the company was founded and one of the really neat applications, which we'll talk about in a second. But for starters, AJ, we always like our guests to kind of paint a picture of who they are and their professional journey with our audience. So tell us more about yourself.
Yeah, so my name's AJ. I grew up in New York. I went to high school in a small boarding school in New Hampshire called Phillips Exeter, where I graduated early to work in the United States Senate and spent a few years on Capitol Hill doing national security stuff. And when you're in Capitol Hill, you have an opportunity to meet really cool, interesting people working on some really big problems, and connected with one of those people. And from there, decided to start Centio and start providing value to hundreds and thousands of companies across the country.
Yeah.
So what was your favorite aspect of working in D.C.?
The city. I mean, everything about that city is amazing. There's so many things to do. The energy there is something special. And I always felt like at DC, because you're working so much policy and, of course, politics, you really have an opportunity to change the world and what you're doing day to day. And that's something that's really infectious.
The history, I really love the history.
Yeah.
It just surrounds you at all times, and it kind of grounds you as you do try to change the world, right? Give you some perspective on things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, AJ, you mentioned Centio. Tell us about the company and what it does, and also looking back, how you got here.
Yeah, so I'll just start with kind of our origin story, which is we started to help professional and college sports teams decide who to draft and who to sign. So it was always amazing to me that, I'll use Tom Brady as an example because I was at school in New Hampshire, that 32, the greatest quarterback of all time. I'm a Jets fan, so that's hard to say. But he went 199th overall.
Right.
And a lot of that is because scouts, despite having seemingly every resource in the world, money, time, experience, couldn't predict that he was going to be great and instead draft people who bust in a year or two.
Yeah.
So I started to look at the problem set, and I'm just natural tech and problem solver, is what could I see and what could technology solve that wasn't being addressed today. And what we figured out was it wasn't how they calculated a lot of the things they were doing in the NFL draft, like 40 time jumping and how accurate you threw the ball. It was more than that. It was the person's mental makeup, how they treated themselves, how they treated their coaches. Did they show up to work on time? Were they obsessed with football? Almost like, what were they doing when nobody else was watching? And so we built Scentio, which is technology to measure the mental makeup of an individual to predict how they will perform in certain environments. And as we started to grow in sports, and actually our sports clients doubled their win percentage over the first 2 years of working with us, we looked at the market and said, hey, there's 150 professional sports teams, but there's 27 million small businesses that can use that same tech and feel a very similar pain of picking the wrong people. And we're able to deploy that in a really, really easy way on our website and on our platform.
So in our warm-up, we were talking about the wide variety of guests and the perspectives we have here. And some are decidedly salesy, and some are very decidedly focused and passionate about the product they do. You seem to be the latter. So tell us about what you do within the business.
Yeah, so I am a head of product. So Scentio is my baby. I love it. It took me, 2-3 years.
You also have a baby.
Yeah, new baby too. Love her.
Love her too.
Love her too. My situation was I didn't have a lot of money to get started, and so I worked out of a cookie factory for 2 years. Where seriously, in order to get to my desk, you had to open the refrigerator and put on like a white coat just for me to get to my computer. And so I remember the days where I was doing all these calculations, and AI came into place, of course, of combining technology and psychology and spreadsheets, begging people, please let me analyze your workforce. Please let me do your candidates, because you have all this fundamental issues with your hiring process, but you're not doing anything to really address it. And so I still do that today. I still manage the product. I am obsessed with where we are and where we're going. And, I think that we're solving a really pervasive problem that a lot of companies have. And honestly, it's a really unique thing that doesn't happen very often in tech.
Wow. What kind of cookies?
Just about every single type of cookie.
I bet you don't eat cookies much anymore,
No,
do you?
I don't. And if we needed some extra money, we used to just hop in the assembly line and start making cookies. So
I love that. I think so many startups and entrepreneurs and folks that are trying to act on this idea or this solution or this product that drives them can relate to exactly what you just shared there. So congrats for going from that environment to what you're doing now. And on that note, of course, you're one of the featured presenters here at Tech Talk, which is, I think, a huge honor. And I think one of the cool things about this, we talked about this in an earlier segment, is this mix of having entrepreneurs and startups and early stage companies with some of the Continental Tires and some of the other speakers they had here today. That's a healthy cross pollination that is needed, right? So give us a sneak peek of some of your key messaging points that you're going to be sharing in your presentation.
Yeah, so kind of the problem that Scentio is addressing first and foremost is employee turnover. So a lot of people talk about the labor market and how there's not a lot of available talent out there, but in doing so, they ignore the fact that there's 73% turnover in the hourly workforce. So if you have 50 people working at your manufacturing plant or truckers, you're going to have to hire 35.
Right.
And so it's our perspective that you need to hire people first the right time, and you need to invest in technology to make sure that those who you are hiring, it's not just a warm body. It's somebody that fits your core values, somebody that will have the mental makeup to stay long term. And kind of on your earlier point, I really liked what you said, just because I think in any innovation, there's really two facets. There's one, the creation of innovation and innovative products, and more importantly, and the reason why I'm excited to be here today and that everybody's in the same room, is the adoption of said innovation products. Because as a technologist and as a tech CEO, I can go out and I can build it what I think is cool and what I think can solve a really big problem. But if it doesn't get adopted and people don't start using it and start paying for it, then companies and technologies like Scentio go away.
Right.
So it's almost like of course, natural selection will select what the best products are and what tech companies will survive. But there is a responsibility, in my opinion, on both sides to make sure that you're doing your part to continue pushing the industry forward.
It seems like predictive analytics are being much more accepted from a behavioral standpoint.
Yep.
And really, I would argue across generations. Obviously the newer generations that are in the workforce the last 10 years, they are being digital natives. They're probably more wired and geared towards predictive analytics and data analysis in general. But I think across the generations, there's more adoption and more a greater openness to using predictive analytics. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I think so. I think that whenever it comes to human capital, it's still a little bit slow, a lot slower than, let's say, operations. And a lot of that is because the people in HR, it's not that they're not open to new ideas, it's they're doing so much.
Yeah.
And they're not just dealing with hiring, they're doing onboarding, culture, training, safety, and just about everything in between, that whenever you can solve one of their issues, it kind of puts all of their other processes in question. And that decision-making process just takes a really long time, in addition to that being wildly underfunded, despite, in my opinion, producing and working on the most important aspect of the business.
I think too, and particularly with hiring, companies have just enough success to make them feel right about it. And it's a very this is a very emotional change, to let go of that, to confess that you are not the best judge of the best people for your company. That's a really difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and it's really expensive. So to replace an hourly worker, we work a lot with, let's just use McDonald's as an example, is McDonald's uses us to hire every single person in one of their locations. So whether you're a delivery driver, you're at drive-through, or you're doing a fry cook, they understand that it costs nearly $5,000 to replace and train a new hourly employee. Yep. So when you look at figures like, hey, I have 50 people on the manufacturing line, there's 73% turnover, so I have to hire 35. 35 times 5 is what, $150,000 you have to spend on annual turnover costs. And those are the things that we try to bring into HR when we're talking with them, just because companies don't necessarily see it as a revenue generating department, and therefore it goes underfunded. But when you start saying, hey, we're going to save you $80,000, $20,000, $10,000, one hire, $5,000, that's when you start getting the attention of people.
Yeah, going back to the HR leadership, while some companies, especially large ones with more resources, in the last few years have created talent acquisition teams and armies of TA professionals to be able to address this this war for talent era we're in. Although we had someone from Southwire, an HR leader, really challenged me on the use of that phrase, and basically implied that companies just aren't getting creative enough, and they're not looking to diversify where they get their talent from. But that aside, the companies that don't have those resources, that aren't able to hire these armies of talent acquisition focused folks. To your point, these are HR leaders have full overflowing plates, right? They don't have time to do all the different things that we're talking about. So this is where your technology can come in and really help make better calculated bets on the hires, right?
Yeah, correct. So the way our tech works is it's an assessment that candidates take, and based on the assessment, we give them a score of 1 through 10 based on their probability to succeed in your company and your culture and your environment that you've spent so much money creating. And so companies right now typically wait until the interview process, or they wait until the final hire to administer assessments. They say, hey, the final 5, let's get them all assessments. But at Sentio, what we've done is we've used AI to really make that assessment really cost effective and really easy to use, so that people actually put it in the front stage of their hiring process. So people are putting it in their job description, saying, we will not even consider you unless you take this assessment. So instead of looking at a huge candidate pool and kind of going through all those resumes and then doing interviews, they're first they'll know before that even starts who has what it takes and who doesn't, and therefore less screening, less interviews, better hires, reduced turnover.
I like it.
So you're sort of providing a pre-filtering before they filter, almost, right?
Correct.
Do they have the ambition, the guts, whatever you want to say, to take the assessment?
Plus, you're able to focus on, instead of focusing on everyone, it gives you one additional filter to focus on the folks that we need to be focusing on from a hireability standpoint, right?
And I think too that especially in supply chain, so much of it is skilled workers, and a lot of times now, kind of what you're seeing on that war on talent is they can't possibly find
for talent.
For talent.
I probably spoke that. Sorry.
For talent is people now are hiring kind of these green people and then training them up. And what our technology does, we don't do hard screening. What we do is we figure out if that person has the attitude. Are they going to show up on time? Are they going to work with your managers really well? Are they going to smile? Kind of all of these things, the soft things that, in my opinion, are far more important than having a CDL license.
Yeah.
Because you could train those things, but you can't necessarily change who you are. And that is what employers, in my opinion, should be focusing on.
Can't teach speed, right? I mean, that's
or height,
right?
Or all the
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Athletic,
But you can teach somebody to flip a burger, right? Drive a truck, any of those things. But you have to have those, and that core value match is so critical.
Yeah.
I was taught many years ago that you hire, evaluate, and fire based on your core values. So that being the case, I wonder, is that part of how the assessment is created? Do companies share with you their core values and things like that?
They don't share with us today. What they do instead, and what we feel to be really, really effective, is that they take their top 3 performers in a particular role, and Sentio, using AI and the 80 years of scientific research called psycholinguistics, learns what those 3 people have in common mentally, where their shared core values, where their shared needs, where their shared personality traits, and uses that as a tailored benchmark for that particular position. So when incoming candidates come in, they are compared to your top performing people, because the math should work where if you hire more people like your best people, they probably exhibit the core values that you've set out because you've already tested your current employees with that, and you ultimately reduce your turnover and happier with your new hires.
So
that's great.
Yeah, it is. And you're already answering the question that I'm going to ask you, but I want to ask you because there might be some other perspective here. No wonder there's more technology coming into the talent space, right? There's been a boom, whether it's you name it, screening, selection, tools, whether it is the workforce development tools that for talent training and some other things. Why is this? That's the naive question, but why is it, and what else do you see?
That's a very, very difficult question to ask in a kind of a 5-minute time frame, but I think there's
good one.
There's a changing of guard in human resources, where there's younger people coming into those roles that care more about data and analytics than the incumbent class. And it's interesting because there's so much inefficiencies in human resources. It's not because we're not awesome at it and that people aren't trying. It's because there's so many large data sets and factors that go into, let's say, a hiring decision, and that we don't articulate and that we don't put a number on a piece of paper, because it's the one part of the business that it feels soft. Like you still use your gut reaction, and like somebody's smile can impact your hiring, right?
Well, it's people. I mean,
it's people. People are so unpredictable, but like the very definition of AI is bringing structure to otherwise unstructured data.
Right.
And so when we are able to articulate a lot of these new data sets, like psychology, like what is this person's score of agreeableness 1 through 100, it provides a lot of opportunity for technology like Sentio, where we're able to take all of that really soft and unstructured data and provide a lot of really exciting insights based off of that.
It's also possible that during the hiring process that some of that doesn't get exposed. You don't ask the right question. You don't ask it the right way. It's not interpreted by the candidate properly. So many things may not get exposed in the hiring process absent this very disciplined methodology, right?
Yeah. And two, like a lot of times we'll have the question of like, we'll meet with the CEO, and the interesting thing about it is the CEO has a very distinct type of person that they want to hire, and from the top all the way to the bottom. And so you're using his gut reaction to make that hiring class, him or her, of course, and they are employing somebody in human resources using their gut to then make another gut decision. And so there's just a lot of uncertainties that I think with technology and of course with artificial intelligence is able to provide a lot of efficiency for.
You tend to hire people who are like you subconsciously.
Yes.
Right.
Absolutely.
So you have a
Subconscious
bunch of
bias.
people who wind up like or having the same strengths or weaknesses as the CEO, and then they don't complement one another, right?
Yeah, like how.
I mean, there's all kinds of downfalls.
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that.
and if you look at the statistics, especially when it comes to workforce discrimination and hiring, is there's factors that you don't even think about. Is what's the person wearing when they come in and visit you? Like is their handshake hard or is it soft?
Yeah.
And what's their hair like and what color are their eyes? And there's a lot of study. What your name is. Like people with not white sounding names receive 50% more callbacks than otherwise. And so I think that it's really
My name is literally White. I would probably never get called back.
So I think it's really, really important from a human perspective is to take a lot of our inherent biases out of the hiring process and allow really empirical data and really non-biased technology to make really hard but important hiring decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
And it's unquestionably thorough every time.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really valuable technology.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, and I think of the baseball scouting. You talk about changing the guard. For years, for decades, for generations, scouting was what you're describing, right?
Yep.
And it still goes on, of course, across all major sports. But there's obviously a huge reason why we're seeing these teams leverage technology and AI and these other things when millions of dollars are at stake for very well-founded reasons. So I got to ask you, because this reminds me of one of my favorite movies to watch, Moneyball.
I knew he was
Billy
going
Bean.
there.
Yeah. Oh, and I hadn't read the book. I'm guilty as charged.
Yep.
But
There's a book.
Yeah. It's about
a real story.
Yeah. A better book though is if you just start to research sabermetrics. It's kind of the how the algorithms get built and how they were able to take all of that data and make a championship winning team.
I love it. I love it. It's so fascinating, and it's so intuitive.
Yeah.
With how you're applying it to talent, and I love the roots in the quarterbacks. We were talking as we were coming on about the Bears and the Texans, how they chose Trubisky a little higher than one of my favorite college players of all time, Deshaun Watson.
Yep.
And I knew, using my gut, of course, and my partiality, that should have been flipped. But who calls me on draft day? No one, right?
Yeah.
But I love the application and the roots. So beyond today's keynote, if folks want to reach out to you and get in touch and learn more about Centio, how do they do that?
Yeah, so we have multiple websites depending on what marketing we're doing. So we work with a lot of different
This from
industries.
the product guy, right?
Yeah, so we have a lot of different landing pages. So if you go to mycentio.com/S as in Sam and C as in Cameron, SC for supply chain. That's going to have a lot of information about our current customers who are in the supply chain space and are providing getting a lot of value from deploying Centio.
Okay.
Very cool.
It is really, really neat technology. I'm looking forward to your keynote today. And you got more travel coming up. Any more red-eye flights in the next few weeks?
I'm sure. It's usually a day or two notice. So
Opportunistic, right?
Yeah, opportunistic.
Fantastic. Well, we've been speaking with AJ Rakicki, founder and CEO at Centio. Really a fascinating business that you're in hyperspeed lately, huh?
Yeah. So, I knock on wood, but one of the fastest growing companies in the Southeast. So we're doing our best, working really hard, and any support that we can get from the community, we'd really appreciate.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're providing a valuable service. I mean that in the end, that's what makes a great company.
Yeah,
So
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it here on Supply Chain Now Radio. To our listeners, stay tuned as we continue our coverage of the 2019 South Carolina Fall Logistics Tech Talk. And be sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever else you get your podcasts from. You can find all of our past episodes, our upcoming events, and a lot more at supplychainnowradio.com. So for Greg White, Scott Luton, and the entire Supply Chain Now Radio gang, have a great day, and we will see you next time on Supply Chain Now Radio. Thanks, everybody.